What's happening, beautiful people? Let's talk about the Week 7 London matchup with the New England Patriots coming into London against the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is technically a home game for Jacksonville. They always freaking play in London. Regardless, let's get to the outliers. Let's try to build a nice pick'em ticket here on Drafters Fantasy together. We'll talk to you guys about start, sit, and give you any other advice that you guys may need. So let's talk about the quarterback matchup. Let's get right into it. We got Drake May, second game. He absolutely flourished in his first game, put up some really good productive fantasy numbers against a formidable Houston Texans defense. This is a pretty decent matchup for him, especially because across the board, the Jags defense is just really bad, but they've been exceptionally, good for opposing quarterbacks. So let's talk about the matchup. The Jags D allows on average to opposing quarterbacks 2.33 pass touchdowns per game. That's the most advantageous matchup on the entire week. So Drake May is an absolute smash for his passing touchdown props in your sports books. They allow the sixth most pass attempts per game at 35.89. That's the Jags defense, by the way, on average. They allow the fourth most pass completions at 25.33 pass completions, and the second most pass yards per game at 286.67 pass yards per game. So when we look at Drake May's props, the ones that they currently have here on Drafters, we'll cross and compare, and we'll tell you guys that it's pretty much a smash across the board. Once again, the Jags allow 286.67 pass yards per game. His pass yards prop is at 203.5 pass yards. They allow, and that's about it. But like his rush yards is also in play. Interception, I'm not necessarily going to touch, but like pass yards plus rush yards, I'll take that because we know he's going to get, some significant chunks in the air. We know that he's going to get some significant chunks on the ground. Pretty much Drake May across the board, other than the interceptions thrown. I absolutely love those props. Out of those props, my favorite one would be the 235 plus pass plus rush. Apparently, English is not Englishing. Let's talk about Trevor Lawrence and his opportunity this week, or potentially lack thereof. It's not a terrible matchup. With that being said, let's just talk about what the Patriots defense allows on average against opposing quarterbacks. So they're 21st in terms of passing touchdowns. They allow 1.17 passing touchdowns per game. They are 10th when it comes to pass attempts. That's 33 pass attempts per game that they allow. The Patriots also allow 22.33 pass completions per week to opposing quarterbacks. That's the 11th most advantageous matchup this week, and they allow the 9th most passing yards to opposing quarterbacks at 241 pass yards per game. So looking at Trevor Lawrence, his passing yards, I think Vegas did a great job here. His passing yards is at 237.5 pass yards. I'm not smashing the over there. I think it's too close to 241 that the Patriots allow. His pass completions is at 21.5. Patriots allowed 22.33. Also don't love it. His rushing yards might be interesting. His pass plus rush might be interesting, but I'm not taking any of those. I really don't like any of his props. Do I think he's startable? Absolutely. I think any quarterback who plays the New England Patriots should be startable. I have him as a top 14 quarterback this week. I have Drake May as a top 10, borderline top 7, top 5. Really all comes down to his rushing upside. Speaking of rushing upside, let's talk about the running backs. Now, both of these running backs are both questionable coming into this game. Travis Etienne with a hamstring and Ramondre Stevenson with Lord knows, because it's just been bad with those New England Patriots offensive line. But it is a good matchup when it comes to the props. So if Ramondre Stevenson misses, insert Antonio Gibson. If Travis Etienne misses, insert, a mixture and combination of Tank Bigsby or Dearness Johnson. I feel like all running backs are startable based on any sort of situation. I think Ramondre Stevenson's a smash start if he's healthy. I think Travis Etienne's a smash start if he's healthy. And I think Tank Bigsby or Dearness Johnson, smash start, borderline flex play. Same with Antonio Gibson. Let's talk about the, and by the way, since these guys are questionable, there are currently no props on Drafters Fantasy Sports for these guys. So today, as we're recording, it's Thursday, the 17th. We should get more information on Friday. That's usually the indicator on if a player participates in practice, at what capacity did they participate. So stay tuned. We'll definitely give you all that information. But let's just talk about what the Jags defense allows on average to opposing running backs. They allow 0.83 rushing touchdowns. I like that. If Ramondre Stevenson's out, I would be more inclined to take Drake May for any time touchdown because I feel like he has more. There's going to be more juice to that one, regardless. The Jags allow 81. That's the 11th most advantageous matchup this week for rushing touchdowns against opposing running backs, by the way. They are the 22nd most advantageous, so not very advantageous matchup when it comes to rushing yards. At 81.33, that's what the Jags allow on a weekly basis to opposing running backs if you average it out. Now, here's where it becomes very advantageous, especially for Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson, both really good, high-quality receiving backs. The Jaguars give up the third most receptions to opposing running backs at 6.5 receptions. They give up the second most receiving yards to running backs on a weekly basis at 56.33. PPR format, any of these New England running backs, depending on if Stevenson plays or sits, is a smash start. If we're looking at what the Patriots defense allow, now they allow the fifth most rushing touchdowns to opposing running backs at 1.17 rush TDs per game. So if you're going to take an anytime touchdown prop, Travis Etienne, I really like him. You could bet a little bit on Tank Bigsby, but if Etienne misses, I think Dearness Johnson might find himself in the end zone. But once again, pay attention to the Friday practice news, and we'll definitely update you guys on our Twitter, on X at Big Drafters HQ. The Patriots allow the eighth most rushing yards to opposing running backs on a weekly basis at 117.17 rush yards per game. So fairly advantageous there. Where it's not advantageous is necessarily the receiving yards. So you're going to be very touchdown dependent here. And the receptions. They are 19th on a weekly basis for opposing running backs, where they give up 4.33 receptions, and 15th to opposing running backs for 33.17 receiving yards. I don't like the receptions or receiving yards for Jags backs this week. They are going to be touchdown dependent, so you have to make sure that you find the right running back. Good luck. But if Etienne plays, must start. I think this is a great bounce back opportunity for him. Let's talk about the wide receivers. You could talk about Jalen Polk. You could talk about Booty. I'm going to talk about Demario Douglas, a.k.a. Pop, because I absolutely love him. Big Pop Douglas truther. With that being said, let's talk about the Jags allow to opposing wide receivers. The Jags allow the third most advantageous matchup for opposing wide receivers. The Jags allow 15.5 receptions to wide receivers. It's the third most advantageous matchup for receiving yards for wide receivers at 192.17 receiving yards. And it's the seventh most advantageous matchup for wide receivers at 1.33 receiving touchdowns. If you look at Demario Douglas's props, his receiving yards is currently at 47.5 receiving yards. I don't hate it. I kind of like it. His receptions is at 4.5 receptions. I don't really like that a heck of a lot. That's not really his game. His game is the smash plays. And speaking of smash plays, 18.5 longest reception for Demario Douglas, I think, is an absolute lock. I really do like that prop a heck of a lot. I'm going to have it on a lot of cards and a lot of tickets. All right. Let's talk about what the Patriots defense allow on average to the wide receiver position. And we're going to talk about Brian Thomas Jr. because Gabe Davis is very inconsistent. And despite Brian Thomas Jr. being, the best wide receiver there, I feel like Gabe Davis or Christian Kirk are going to see a lot of Christian Gonzalez. With that being said, Brian Thomas Jr. is him. He's borderline matchup proof. I really do love this player. And it sucks because early on, he got 2 targets in the first drive for the Jacksonville Jaguars last week against the Chicago Bears. And then they just stopped trying to feed him, and he disappeared. And then they forced a couple of terrible balls. And anyways, it's just poor. So let's talk about the advantages once again for Brian Thomas Jr. and his fellow Jacksonville Jaguars wide receivers. If we're talking about receptions, the Patriots allowed the 7th most on a weekly basis at 13.67 receptions to opposing wide receivers. If we're talking about receiving yards, they allow the 10th most to opposing wide receivers on a weekly basis at 159.17 receiving yards. If we're talking about receiving touchdowns, it's the 18th. So not very advantageous, not advantageous. It's right around the middle. I think Brian Thomas Jr. will find himself in the end zone this week as well. At 0.83 receiving touchdowns. With that being said, I think both of these guys are a smash start. If it's going to be Booty, if it's going to be Polk, shame on me, but I'm riding with Demario Douglas. And I love Brian Thomas Jr. this week and each and every other week. I have him as a top 10 wide receiver. We projected that preseason, and we're still riding it. Okay. Shout out to Brian Thomas Jr. Absolutely spectacular. 6'3", 210 pounds, 4.340. Yes, please. Let's go deep ball threat. And Trevor Lawrence likes to throw the ball deep. Let's talk tight ends. All right. Hunter Henry, Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram's questionable, but he looks like he's going to be good to go. So let's talk about what the Jags defense allows to opposing tight ends. Obviously, we saw Cole Kmet absolutely smash last week. Kind of came as an outlier performance, but hey, man, it is what it is. I'm here for it. I think Hunter Henry is going to be touchdown dependent because when we're talking about receptions, it's not very opportunistic. It's the 25th most advantageous, so not very advantageous at all. The Jags defense allows 3.5 receptions on average to opposing tight ends. Don't really like that. If we're talking about receiving yards, also don't really like it at all. It's 42.17 receiving yards that they allow to opposing tight ends. And then if we're talking about receiving touchdowns, they allow 0.67 receiving touchdowns, which is actually the most advantageous matchup for tight ends this week. So I think he's startable. If you got a Jake Ferguson out, sure. If you got a Cole Kmet out, sure. He's definitely startable, but he's going to be touchdown dependent. I don't think the volume is going to be there. And if we're looking at his props right now, it's 30.5 receiving yards. I mean, I think he could go over, but I'm not betting on it. Longest reception. Also, don't necessarily love it at 15.5 for longest reception. So I'm not touching any of his props, but I do think he's startable. If we're talking about what the Patriots defense allows to opposing tight ends, I think Evan Ingram's an outlier. I think he's the number one intermediate target for the Jags. So I'm not really paying attention as to if this is advantageous or not, because regardless, the matchup is terrible. The Patriots have very, very slow linebackers, and I'm a diehard Patriots fan, so I'll tell you the truth. You bet your booty, I'll tell you the truth, and not Keyshawn Booty. No. Okay, so Patriots defense allows on average to opposing tight ends 4.33 receptions. That's the 16th most advantageous matchup. I'm going to shoot those numbers up significantly. They don't have a receptions prop for him currently on drafters. They allow the 11th most advantageous matchup for opposing tight ends at 48.67 receiving yards. His prop is at 45.5. I think Vegas did an excellent job here. They allow 0.17 receiving TDs, which is the 18th most advantageous. I don't think Ingram finds the end zone. I think he's going to get a heck of a ton of receptions. I don't really want to touch his longest reception prop. I don't really want to touch his receiving yards prop. Once and if drafters puts out his receptions prop, if it's around 5, 4.5, 5.5, even 6.5, I'd be inclined to take it. Anyways, y'all, this is game 2. Thank you guys for supporting. If you guys stuck around, you're a real one. I appreciate you. Make sure you smash the subscribe button. Make sure you like the video. We're going to be pumping out as many of these videos as we possibly can. Thanks again, guys, from the bottom of my heart for the support. And we'll talk to you guys about game 3 shortly. Let's go.